In the heart of the Congolese rainforest, where trees whispered secrets older than scripture and rivers sang lullabies to the moon, there stood a covenant no map dared to mark, the sanctum of St. Mambo, encircled by days of foliage and ancestral spirits. It was a place shrouded in silence and legend. Elders in nearby villages spoke of miracles hidden beneath its stone floor, of women who sang with angels and of tears that healed the blind. There, among veiled sisters and perpetual incest, lived Sister Naliaka, a young nun unlike any other, burned under a blood moon in a village swallowed by time. She carried a single tear-shaped mark beneath her left eyes, a blemish that no soap nor prayer could remove. The old women of her village whispered, "She's one of the bitter tears, the ones who dream when the world trembles." Naliaka had always seen things, flickers of truth in dreams, whispers in the wind that others claimed were madness. She hid her vision behind long hours in the chapel, but the dreams refused to sleep. Lately, they had grown darker. Statues in her vision bled. Crosses bent towards the ground, and always a white-robed man wept in silence. One morning, the air in the covenant turned sour. Birds refused to sing. During Lauds, a younger nun screamed and fainted when the crucifix above the altar seemed to blink. Sister Naliaka stood motionless, her lips still moving in prayer as if nothing had happened, but her heart pounded like a funeral drum. That night, the wind brought with it smell of burning myrrh and something else decay. As she lit a candle by the statues of St. Teresa, a guest extinguished the flame. The statue's stone eyes stared directly at her now. A voice, low and aching, echoed in her soul. One tear shall unlock the hidden tomb. Not all corpses are cold. That night, Naliaka could not sleep. The covenant stone's walls seemed to pulse with unseen energy, as though the very air carried a secret too heavy for silence. She lay beneath her thin wood blanket, rosary in hand, whispering psalms to herself like armor against creeping dread. But the vision came anywhere. She stood in a grand marble hall, veiled in darkness, its wall adorned with ancient Catholic painting that wept blood instead of paint. In the center of the room lay a body wrapped in linen and gold, Pope Francis. His face was pale and serene, but wrung, as though death had come without consent. Around him stood a circle of nuns, their hands bowed, yet their hands were bound behind them, with strands of rosaries, beads biting into skin like thorns. From the shadows, a voice whispered clear yet heavy, "Only one tear can unmask the lie." Sister Naliaka reached forward to touch the Pope's cold hood, but the marble beneath her cracked open. From the visual rose a black fog, thick and weeping, and in its mid she saw her own reflection, crying, but her tears turned to ash before they could fall. She awoke gasping. Her habit was soaked in sweat. The crucifix around her neck hot like it had been forged in fire. At the foot of her bed lay something that hadn't been there before, a wooden rosary, its bead carved with tiny crucifix, worn and smooth, as if held in ancient hands. She picked it up with trembling fingers. It was unmistakable. It was Pope's rosary. No one in Covenant thought such as a thing. Sister Naliaka had seen it only once, on an olden Vatican broadcast, when Pope Francis spoke of humility while blessing refugees in Lesbos. She remembered the shape of the cross, the chipped left arm, the single ivory bead among the wooden ones. She whispered a prayer, but it came out hollow. The shadows in her cells seemed to shift, and though no one spoke aloud, deep in her heart she knew the Pope was dead. But his death was not ending. It was a warning. 3 days passed with no peace. Sister Naliaka fasted and prayed, her eyes sunken and voice hoarse from unspoken dread. She told no one about the rosary or the vision, but the air around her grew heavy, like the stillness before a storm. The other nuns kept their distance, unsure if it was fear or reverence that silenced them. Then came the letter. It arrived not by courier nor email, but in the hands of Father Lazaro, a pale priest with one hand glove and the other missing entirely. He emerged from the forest straight at dawn, escorted by no one, yet claiming to have come directly from the apostolic palace in Rome. He asked to see Sister Naliaka by name. In the Covenant candlelight prayer room, he handed a sealed scroll wrapped in crimson ribbon marked with papal sigil. His voice was low, as if afraid of being overheard by the words themselves. "It is written," he said, "that you must come to Rome immediately. There are circumstances the Church cannot explain. The Holy Father has gone missing. You were named by him in private letter, one that was never meant to be opened unless he vanished." Naliaka's blood chilled. "Missing? But I saw," she stopped. Lazaro. Father Lazaro tilted his head, watching her too closely. "You saw something?" She lowered her gaze and said nothing. The silence between them hummed. "You leave at nightfall," he said at last. "No one must know you've gone." Before she could ask more, the Covenant ancient bell rang thrice, a sound reserved only for death. The eldest nun, Sister Bali, had collapsed in the garden. She was 112 years old and blind, her skin like folded parchment, her lips always moving in prayer. But as Naliaka knelt beside her, the old woman grasped her hand with surprising strength. With her dying breath, she rasped, "Beware the weeping mask. Not all corpses are cold." And then her lips froze in a crooked smile, as though she do finally see something beautiful. That evening, Naliaka packed nothing but the rosary, her Bible, and a small bottle of anointing oil. She wore no shoes as she stepped beyond the Covenant gate for the first time in 17 years. The jungle whispered in tongues. The moon hung like a watchful eyes. The journey had begun. The path from Congo to Rome was not paved with comfort. Sister Naliaka traveled in silence, seated beside Father Lazaro in a weather-beaten jeep that coughed smoke and smell of dust and ancient incense. They moved through thick jungle, then across rust-colored roads to a hidden airstrip known only to Vatican agents and smugglers' priests. On the flight, she said little. Her eyes stared out the window, but her soul wandered elsewhere. Her hand never let go of the Pope's rosary. Each bead burned silently, warmer than the last, as though alive and counting. Father Lazaro read from an old Latin Bible with frayed edges and pages missing verses. Once he looked up and muttered, "Tell me if you dream again, especially if it is loud." She did dream. That night, above the Mediterranean, she saw Pope Francis clowning from within a coffin, buried beneath marble. His eyes bulged, his mouth moved, but no sound came, only a heartbeat, loud and thunderous, echoing through the tomb. Behind him stood robed figure with golden mask and twisted crucifix, chanting in a tongue she had never heard. One held a chalice filled with ash, another held her name, etched into a scroll with blood. She awoke with her fingernail digging into her palm and the rosary coiled tightly around her wrist, cutting into the skin. Upon arriving in Rome, everything felt wrong. It was spring, but the air was cold. The sun struggled to pierce the gray sky above the Vatican. Pigeons refused to perch near St. Peter's Basilica. As they entered the city, she noticed the portrait of the Pope, once proudly displayed in square cathedrals and caps, had been covered in black cloth, draped like mourning veils. The guards at the Vatican said nothing to her, only nodded and stepped aside. A strange hush had fallen over the city, like the breath held between two earthquakes. Inside the apostolic palace, cardinals whispered in corners, their faces pinched with worry. Some greeted her with tight smiles and quickly exit. Others simply turned away. A few refused to look her in the eyes at all. She passed through halls filled with silence until she reached a heavy door, lined with gold leaf vines and Latin script. There, Father Lazarus spoke for the first time in hours. You must see him now. But remember what was told to you. Not all corpses are cold. Then he pushed open the door, and the room beyond swallowed her whole. The chamber was deep beneath the Vatican, a crypt not marked on any public map. They descended in silence, the air growing colder with each stone step. The hallway was lined with saints carved in white marble, their eyes gouged out, and their hands bound in chains of gold. At the end of the passage, an iron gate stood open. Beyond it lay the crypt. The room was circular, lit only by flickering candles embedded in skull-shaped holders. In its center rested a marble slab carved with papal insignia. On it lay the body of Pope Francis. He was dressed in full white robes, his papal ring still on his finger, his hand crossed gently over his chest. He looked peaceful, too peaceful, but Naliaka breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, the wooden rosary pulsing like a heartbeat in her hand. There were no signs of decay, no smell, no color lost from his lips. His skin was pale, yes, but not lifeless, and his eyes, though closed, seemed strewn beneath the lids, as if they fought against eternal rest. And then it happened. The moment she looked into his face, her soul shattered. Tears erupted from her eyes, not sadness, but something deeper, something ancestral, something that came from the bones of the earth and the ways of prophecy. She wept as though the sky had split open inside her. Her tears fell in slow drops onto the Pope's linen robe. One landed on his chest, just above his heart. The room trembled. The Pope's eyes opened, briefly, wide and glassy, filled with an emotion too vast to name: grief, rage, love, terror. His mouth moved, but no breath escaped. Then, just as suddenly, his eyes shut again. From behind the altar, a black smoke began to rise, as if leaking from cracks in the marble. It twisted in air like a living thing, coiling around Naliaka's feet. And then a voice, disembodied, ancient, feminine, and male, at once whispered from within the smoke. Truth demands blood. The lie was sealed in light. Now it shall be undone in shadow. The candles flared violently and then extinguished. Darkness swallowed her, and in the dark, she could still feel the Pope's eyes watching. When light returned, it came not from candles but from her rosary, which now glowed faintly with a golden hue. Sister Naliaka blood stood alone. Her father Lazarus was gone, the door to the crypt sealed. The Pope's body lay still on the slab, as if nothing had stirred. But at the foot of the altar, something waited. It was a leather-bound in diary, its cover etched with a papal seal and edges stained with what looked like dried wine or blood. A ribbon marked a page near the center, and trembling Naliaka opened it. The Pope's handwriting greeted her, slanted, rushed. These were not official entries, but confessions. They wear the robe of shepherds, but their mouths are filled with vipers. A counsel, secret even to me, has rooted itself into the Holy See. They twist the word. They trade indulgence for power. I have seen contracts signed with foreign shadows, agreements that curse the church in exchange for worldly control. I opposed them. I spoke out. Then the wine turned bitter, and my dreams turned to fire. They claim I was sick, but I know poison when it walks my veins. If this diary is found, it means I am dead or worse. There is one nun, born under tear. Find her. She is the last echo of Mambo's vision. Only her sorrow can awaken the truth buried beneath these stones. Naliaka dropped to her knees, heart pounding like a war drum. So it was true. Pope Francis had been murdered not by hand, but by silence and betrayal. Those who killed him still walked in the halls above her head, perhaps smiling at tourists and blessing children, wearing crimson robes while their souls rotted from within. She turned another page and found a sketch. The same wooden rosary she now held. Beneath it, a single line written in Latin. Lacrima amara aperi potan veritas. The bitter tears opened the gate of truth. Her hands trembled. She remembered the stories whispered by the old nuns of St. Mambo, the prophecy of the girl born with a tear on her skin. Who would weep for the corpse of the righteous man and awoken justice from beneath the earth? She had always thought them just folktales, but this was no longer folklore. This was real. This was holy war. A sound echoed through the crypt, the grinding of stones on stone. A section of the wall had shifted, revealing a staircase carved in ancient brick and lined with bones. At its mouth stood the ghostly outline of a man in white, who raised his hand not in blessing, but in warning. The Pope's diary snapped shut in her hands, and a voice, now calm and familiar, whispered from within her own mind, "They will come for you now, daughter of Mambo." But light burns clearer in the heart of darkness. The spiral staircase descended into what could only be called the underbelly of the Vatican, a place untouched by time, where scriptures lay crumbling on stone altars and crucifixes bled rust. With each step, Sister Naliaka felt the rosary around her wrist tighten, beads glowing faintly as if resisting the evil ahead. At the base of the staircase stood an ancient chapel, its windows sealed with obsidians, its altar defaced with black wax and inverted icons. This was not a place of worship. It was a prison, and something was trying to break out. The moment she entered, the ground shuddered. Shadows leaped across the walls. Voices, countless and whispering, began to circle her. None of sorrow, tear of prophecy. You should not have come. From the darkness they emerged, cardinals in blood-red vestments, their faces hidden behind masks of gold and bones. Eyes burned where holes should be. They hovered above the ground, robes trailing smoke. In their hands, they held twisted relics, a broken crozier, a mirror black host, a chalice filled with a thick pulsing fluid, and in the center, on a throne of ash and marble, sat the high mask, a figure in papal garment, but faceless. You cry for the corpse, it said, voiced like a cracked bell, but the church has not died. It has evolved. We burn the old truth to make the room for dominion. Sister Naliaka gripped the Pope's diary in one hand and raised the rosary with the other. The glowing beads burned white hot now, casting circles of purity across the chapel's corrupted icons. You poisoned him, she said, voice steady. You buried him in silence, but God does not forget, and his tears do not dry. The high mask laughed. Do you think tears can stop us? Do you think prophecy will save you? Behind him, the chained spirit of Pope Francis appeared, mouth open in silent agony, robe flickering like paper. Naliaka dropped to her knees and began to pray aloud, not in Latin, but the old Bantu tongue of her village, words passed down by grandmothers, woven with breath and memory. The air split open. A blinding light burst from her chest. The rosary exploded into flame, white fire that formed the shape of a winged cross. The masked cardinals screamed as their malice and relics turned to ash. One by one, their masks cracked, revealing faces twisted by fear, not demons, but men, old, cowardly, broken. The high mask stood last. I am the new church, it hissed. No, she said, stepping forward, eyes alight, you are its shadow, and you have no place in the light. She placed the diary on the altar. The earth roared. A column of golden fire surged upward, engulfing the throne and everything around it. The high mass screamed as it dissolves, leaving only smoke and dust. The chained spirit of the Pope opened his eyes and smiled. The chapel was still. The smoke cleared, and behind her, the sealed stairway began to crumble. There was only one way out now, through revelation. The altar cracked behind her. Fire licked the ceiling. Sister Naliaka clutched the Pope's diary to her chest and ran, following instinct through a collapsing corridor, bathed in smoke and holy light. The rosary had vanished, its purpose fulfilled, its sacrifice made. Upward she climbed, through vaults and forgotten tunnels. The very stones whispered ancient prayers in her ears. She burst through a concealed door behind the Vatican archives. Just as the sun broke through the stormy sky, for the first time in days, light fell upon the city, clear, honest, unsullied. But she was not safe. A small cadre of guards awaited her, led by Cardinal Bertrand, the last of the masked conspirators, his face now exposed, but his smile unchanged. "You know too much," he said calmly, hands folded as if in prayer. "Give me the book. No one will believe you anyway." Naliaka looked at him. No longer afraid, she reached into her habit and drew out the vial of anointing oil, Saint Mambo's gift. With quiet reverence, she poured it over the cover of the Pope's diary. The leather hissed, the seal glowed. A great wind surged across the Vatican, lifting her veil and extinguishing the shadows around the guards. From the skies descended a single dove, glowing with golden light, landing on the altar's rubble behind her. Its eyes burned like suns. Bertrand screamed, not in fear, but in guilt. His knees buckled. He turned to flee, but his feet refused to move, and then he fell. In days that followed, the diary was revealed to the public by one courageous priest. Investigations erupted. Cardinals resigned. Masses were held across the world in honor of Pope Francis, who was reburied in open, beneath clear skies and the weeping eyes of the faithful. As for Sister Naliaka, she disappeared quietly from public views. Some say she returned to the covenant. Others claim she walks the earth still, appearing only when the truth is buried and justice forgotten. But in a forgotten village at the edge of the Congo River, the old ones whispered, she was not a nun. She was the tear of Mambo, the one who wept, and in doing so, unsealed heaven's vengeance. And in a quiet chapel, far from Rome, there hung a single wooden rosary, one to the church, forever humming with divine fire.